Welcome back to Detroit Next. I'm Khary Frazier with Detroit is Different, here with
Malachi Barrett from BridgeDetroit.
Definitely. In today's episode, we're talking a lot about small businesses. We have Jennyfer Crawford of All Things Detroit, and we also have Charity Dean, and we know the Michigan Black Business Alliance, all talking about a lot of what's happening with small business. This is a key topic in the city of Detroit. You're a journalist. What are people usually saying about small business in Detroit to you?
It's hard to open one, basically. I mean, the thing that we've consistently heard in the time that I've been, reporting on issues in the city and certainly before city council, and now as we have these mayoral elections, is that there's too much red tape, there's too many regulations, there's too many hoops to jump through. It's just very difficult to get a business going. And then once they do get started, it's like you need access to funding. A lot of folks need help finding real estate. They need help stabilizing commercial corridors so that it becomes a thriving kind of walkable area that people feel comfortable visiting. And there's other businesses that are kind of growing up that area together and building up momentum. The mayoral candidates have kind of similar visions on this in terms of making it easier, streamlining the process, cutting regulations, providing funding. But in terms of the specifics, I'm interested to hear more from business leaders themselves about what they actually need and how on the mark the candidates are right now. I mean, it's definitely one of the top issues and seems pretty tied in with a lot of the other neighborhood revitalization conversations that we have.
Very much so. I definitely think that so many of the discussions about those third spaces come into play and people saying that I want to be in my neighborhood and go to businesses that I enjoy. Like communities always talk about the restaurants. They want places that coffee shop. They want places that they can enjoy and buy the things that they love. The business owners are like, it's sometimes tough to connect to that. So today's episode is exploring that. And this is going to be an interesting one when we think about what's happening politically for city council and also for the next executive, the mayor. We'll be right back with more Detroit Next. Welcome back to Detroit Next. And today we're talking a lot about small business. Small business, as we know, is one of the key things that's bringing so much energy back to the city of Detroit. We have a wonderful guest, Jennyfer Crawford of All Things Detroit. How are you?
I am doing amazing, Khary. How are you?
Great. So All Things Detroit, it is the largest marketplace in Detroit for a lot of small businesses and vendors. How did it start? What was the inception? How did you put this together?
Well, you know what? I started All Things Detroit in my one-bedroom apartment 11 years ago. I was impressed by people who had a passion for doing what they love. They can make things with their hands. And I always felt like I really couldn't make anything. So it was kind of like my goal to be like their biggest cheerleader. So I took my rent money and bet on myself and invested in the Eastern market of renting the space. And now we promote 200 small businesses and we get about 12,000 customers in one day.
12,000 customers all coming into the city of Detroit, as we know. And you said 11 years. So you've seen this grow over time. Over time, what energy has shifted as you've watched a lot of these small businesses and owners grow their businesses throughout this time?
I think it was a thing of just like at one point, I think people were really into like shopping local and being very intentional. And then at one point in time, I would say 2019, I saw it kind of die down a little bit of like just people not shopping local. And then we had the pandemic and then they're very intentional again about shopping local, shopping small, because we are the backbone to the community, right? If there were no small businesses, like where would we be? And so I've been seeing it kind of go up and down. I see it now where people are like, I'm not going to the big box stores. I want to shop local. I want to invest in my community. And so for me, I just feel like it's super important that I create a platform where I'm putting people in front of thousands of customers. But I also want the business owner to feel like this is your event, right? People are coming to see you. I want them to seek you out. So that's why we really invest in a lot of the marketing and everything to promote all of the businesses that are there. It's not about Jennyfer and us bringing this together. We're our own street team. We're our own community. And I always say this all the time, and we've talked about this, is that anybody can have a pop-up where you sell tables and fill up a room. But if you're building community, it's a different thing. And that's what we do with All Things Detroit.
All right. Inside that community, we've seen national brands like really take off over so many things politically happening in Detroit, especially like Shinola. It's like whole brand was really built on a lot of what's happening in Detroit and how that's grown into many different things and diversified. But also a lot of small businesses have carried on some of these same traditions. The pandemic was tough for a lot of small businesses. What was that take, and how politically did you see a lot of the people respond to that as far as staying open during a tougher time?
The pandemic was really hard, but you know the crazy thing, Khary, is it seems like it's harder now than it was during the pandemic.
Hmm.
Like I said before, people were intentional with shopping local. There was more funding available. There were grants available. People were trying to do the right thing. Oh, we have to support small business. We have to support community. And a lot of the politicians and different people were pushing the same narrative. And so, now it's a little bit harder. It's not the same. It's not the same funding that's available. It's not the grants that are available. And people are shifting and they're not as excited, it seems like sometimes, or intentional. But I feel like people push that narrative when there is like something that they want you to do or to get them involved, but then like they kind of drop the ball on that. But small businesses now need it more than ever. We need people to come. People are closing every day, and it's a lot to reinvent yourself and be resilient. How many times can you do that, right? And do all these things. But I think that, a small business, their goal is to be a big business one day, right? And to have that ongoing things of happening. But it has been really hard and really tough. But I think it's harder now than it was during the pandemic.
Which definitely goes into the lending opportunities. What relationships have the banks had with a lot of the small businesses that you've seen throughout the city of Detroit? What do you hear from a lot of the owners as far as those lending opportunities to grow their business or stabilize or just even have that line of credit?
Oh, Khary, why are you doing this to me today? No. So when I think about banks, I think that it's still the same. It is the same for a small business owner. It's hard for you to work with a bank and get a loan. It just is. That's where there's programs like Black Leaders Detroit and is it the Detroit Fund? Like certain things like that. I feel like that is the small business to go there first before they go to the bank. I haven't seen a lot. I mean, there's programs that the bank says they have. I've worked with Chase in the past. They have certain programs, but with the program with Chase to get funding or for them to help, you have to make $100,000 a year. Right? Some people feel like that's not a lot of money. But if I'm a person who's just starting out and I'm planning this and I need funding for my business, I'm not necessarily going to make $100,000 a year. So I feel like these restrictions of the bank, all these things they qualify for, it doesn't happen. And that's where these programs come into play because they're really looking at how to help you grow it and then also giving you technical assistance.
Okay, and I definitely have to ask from this lens too, because as you grow that business, when you get to that $100,000 and past that 100,000, another one of the key things always brought up from big business is the fact that the talent pool here is difficult sometimes to engage. And this may be also more of a national issue too. I don't think that this is just specific to the city of Detroit, but what is it like for a lot of the small businesses when it comes to staffing their business to make sure that they have the right proper support when they're doing the work and executing their dreams coming to life? What's the talent pool like inside the city of Detroit? What has been some of the most effective ways to grow a team?
Whew. Well, it is difficult also too with the staffing. I think that one of the things that I do is that there are small business owners who are looking to make extra money while they're running their business. So my business, I employ other small business owners part-time so that they can make money. I have staffing, they can make money, and they can also work on their business at the same time. That is something that has worked for me the best because it is difficult because everyone wants $25 an hour, right? And with the new taxes and all these things that you have to take care of, when you have staffing, it is a lot. There's a certain amount that a small business owner just cannot pay. But I think that, it is hard. I mean, there are people where you really have to really streamline and put those job descriptions in place and know exactly what you're looking for. Because when a small business owner, when you work for one, sometimes you are the janitor, you're the cashier, you're doing all of that. And so people want to be paid for every last single one of those things, right? So like I said, I feel like what works for me is employing people who know how it is to run a small business. And so they're like, hey, listen, I'm still working on my business. I make jewelry, but I need to pay my bills at the same time. And that's something that works for me. And I think that that is like a good option to do. But the talent pool here, I wouldn't say that it's bad. I just think that maybe that position that they're looking for, it's just not for them. But it can be difficult to find staff because you're not going to find someone who's going to work as hard for it as you do. And I just think that sometimes I know that the cost of living is expensive. So paying someone $20 to $25 an hour, it's not even in my budget also. So it can be difficult because people want to get paid a certain amount.
And as you talk about that now, I guess like the promising things that you've seen, because you've run markets with Beacon Park, You've also been in Campus Martius. What have you seen as far as like some of the things that have connected best over these 11 years, especially with all things Detroit? What has connected most to keep these small businesses thriving here?
I think the advertising, keeping a business thriving, I think, like I said, go back to the programs, the ones with the funding, but just being resilient. What have I seen? I see people get up every single day and work and do what they have to do to keep their doors open, to feed their families. And I feel like they are doing what it is that works for them. Because when you say, what am I seeing in a way of what, though? I'm trying to get a little bit
More so just what's been the most effective things that you've seen in the growth of a lot of the small businesses in Detroit as you've witnessed?
uh, hmm, I feel like them just working through their business, figuring it out. I mean, that's really what I'm seeing, just people working hard, just people actually every single day getting that marketing plan together and working through their business. That's all I see is people really working hard to keep those doors open and doing everything they can, whether it's a marketing strategy, whether it's standing on the corner, where it's closing down their restaurant and having a food truck, right? So it's just they're doing what's the best for them in their business that they can still feed their family. If one business owner had a restaurant for 15 years during the pandemic, they didn't own the building, so they were pushed out because the rents were too expensive. So they purchased the food truck, and they've been thriving in their food truck because it cuts down on overhead costs. So I think people being resilient, I think them being able to actually pivot has really been the strategy that are keeping people going. Being resilient and pivoting.
With that, thank you so much, Jennifer. You've
Thank
given
you.
a lot of that insight of small business owners and being on Detroit Next. We have another
Mm,
segment still talking about this
mm.
small business infrastructure. Thank you so much.
All right, joining me on the show now is the president and CEO of the Michigan Black Business Alliance, Charity Dean. Welcome to the show.
Hi, so glad to be here.
I'm glad you're joining us. Charity's usually the first person I call when I need some insight into how the business community is thinking, and it's been really cool to see the Business Alliance grow from a Detroit and like Southeast Michigan project to now being across the state. And maybe we could just start if you could tell us a little about that journey, how you got into this work, and what does the Michigan Black Business Alliance do?
Yeah, absolutely. So I spent many years as a public servant working formerly in Mayor Duggan's administration. I was the director of civil rights, inclusion, and opportunity. And when COVID happened, I immediately became responsible for the city's small business response. And it was during that time where we really saw a need for an organization that was here locally to advocate for Black-owned businesses. Black businesses and Black people were being hit by the disease of the coronavirus and then the impacts of the economy. And so what was then called the Metro Detroit Black Business Alliance started in March. We officially launched in March, although a lot of the planning and the research for it started during the pandemic. And we are almost 5 years old. We'll be 5 years old in March of 2026. And we were focused on Metro Detroit, but what we've seen is that there is such a need for advocacy and programs that are designed to help Black businesses grow, sustain, and thrive across the state. Small businesses employ 50% of Michiganders, and that statistic is relevant to Detroit as well. And so, in 2024, we expanded to be the Michigan Black Business Alliance, and we took some of our programs and are taking some of our programs on the road in Lansing, Benton Harbor, Flint, Grand Rapids. We just had a call this afternoon. I had about 100 and so members on there, and they're from all over the state. So it was really good to talk to them and talk about what we got going on there.
I remember during the pandemic, there was a real effort to support Black businesses. There were even like news agencies that I worked at were putting together lists of
Yeah.
Black-owned businesses across the state, letting people know, here's how you can support them. It just, as an observer, it feels like some of that has been less emphasized as time goes on. We're like 5 years out of the first coronavirus case. I'm
Yep.
not sure how far out of the pandemic we actually are, but um, from your perspective, like there was a lot of intentionality around supporting Black businesses a few years ago. Has that kept up, or has anything changed there?
I'll say this. One of the things that the pandemic did was it did not create any disparities, but it highlighted disparities that already existed. And so you saw really the big push for supporting Black businesses during the pandemic because everyone was sitting at home, right? And and it was very clear You could just see it. The math was clear. I think that the disparity still exists. There's a racial wealth gap in our country. White families and black families with the same education, same income. A white family's gonna have 9 times the wealth as black family, and that's not a new statistic. And we see entrepreneurship as one of those pathways for closing that racial wealth gap. But the need is still there. I would say we did see a lot of attention, but people's attention spans in this country get short, and when the political winds change, oftentimes so do things that really aren't really motivated. If they're motivated from charity, if you will, no pun intended, then a lot of times it's easy to look to the next cause. But if you actually look at the racial wealth gap and the problem in our economy, one as an economic problem, as an economic problem for our country, then I think systems change becomes more permanent. And so we really have to kind of reshape how we look at it. When you look at it as charity, then you go on to the next issue and the next issue. But when you look at this as like an actual tool that continues to keep America and not as competitive as other countries in the world, and you look at it as not allowing the state of Michigan and even the city of Detroit to compete, then we might be a little bit more focused long term.
Public officials, when I think of kind of what the conversation's been like in the last year or so, there's like this real acknowledgement that small businesses are the backbone of the community, the backbone of the economy, a way for Detroiters to build wealth and become, self-sufficient. But there's always this feeling that it's too difficult to start a business and sustain one. There's been efforts this year to peel back some of the regulations around small businesses, streamline the process of getting licenses. But it sounds like there's more work to be done there. Can you tell us, like, what are the big challenges that stand in the way for someone to start a small business in the city of Detroit? And for those that are, maybe a couple of years into their journey, is there some insecurity there? Like, what do they face that prevents them from being, sustainable long-term businesses?
Yeah, I mean, we could be here all day, right?
Yeah.
Uh, but one of the biggest obstacles for small business across the board is access to capital. Most small businesses are undercapitalized. And so a lot of folks are using their own savings. And then when you get into the racial wealth gap component of that, folks don't have assets to leverage to get the capital that they need for their business. So their access to capital continues to be an issue. But then when you also layer on access to capital with what I like to call overregulation of small businesses, I really believe small businesses across the state are really overregulated and under-resourced, meaning that they are required to compete in terms of compliance with corporations that are not their size. But when it comes to the resources that are available for small businesses, there's just a lack. And so I think when you couple access to capital with overregulation, and then also, just not having an environment, a business friendly environment. And I want to be clear, I'm saying a small business friendly environment. It makes it really, really difficult. But one thing we know about entrepreneurs, we see this in Detroit, we see this across the state, is there is this some sort of like the resilience, kind of like there's this hustle mentality. People have dreams that they want to see come into fruition. And despite all of these challenges, we do see small businesses opening every day, and despite the environment, people are still starting and attempting to grow small businesses. And that's what we try to do at the Black Business Alliance, is try to help our members to navigate bureaucracy, for example, or use our voice to talk to elected officials or decision makers to ask them, are they thinking about small businesses when they're making these decisions that will inevitably impact them?
How impactful, or I guess, what has the impact been of some of the changes that were made earlier this year? I think it was in the spring. It was announced that they were going to get rid of a duplicate license that restaurants needed to get to kind of make that easier. I think they tried to peel back some of the steps that it takes to get licensed as well. And then there was a concierge group that was put together, I think based out of the mayor's office, that would basically help serve as kind of a liaison between small businesses that don't have those legal teams and those technical folks that can navigate some of this stuff, and the city government to say, people within the government are going to help you along that path. Has that made much of an impact yet? Are we seeing the effects of that?
So as it relates to the ordinance that removed the duplicative license, I don't have the data on that immediately, but I mean that's an automatic immediate fix, right? Where you don't have to get something because you're already getting it at the state. The concierge service is just getting up and running, but we work with that team, and we have been working with that team for a long time. I think the city of Detroit, and I can say this because I worked in on the 11th floor, like I worked in the mayor's office. It looks very different today than it did 5 years ago for small businesses. It just does. And whether it's the concierge team, whether it's the director of entrepreneurship now that we did not have, and so whether it's we announced the Capital Hub earlier this week. There are a lot of things that we had talked about during the pandemic and talked about over the first couple of years post COVID that are actually happening now, but we still have such a long way to go. I mean, we have a long way to go. We have to really center small business as drivers of economic development, and not be afterthoughts of economic development. And I think we're heading in the right direction, but we still have a long way to go.
There's always a conversation at the city council table of where contracts are going, and there's always a push among council members to make sure more of the city's businesses going toward Detroit-based businesses. How are we doing there, and how can we be better? I mean, some of the explanations that we hear from city departments about why contracts are going to companies in the suburbs or in Ohio or across the country even is that Detroit businesses don't have like the capacity to do the
There's
kinds of
no
work that
word.
they need. Yeah. So I don't know. How does that land with you?
So I think two things. First, what I would really love to see more of in this current administration, even still a couple months left, and the new administration, is more transparency on where the contracts are going, specifically of the contracts, whether they're Detroit based or not. I want to get deeper than even Detroit based because I used to run the city's civil rights department, and so Detroit based just means you have a Detroit location, right? So technically, Microsoft as a Detroit-based business, or Google is a Detroit-based, but they got a Detroit office, that's Detroit-based.
As opposed to being like Detroit headquartered,
That's
right?
exactly right. Or Detroit resident employed, which means 51% or more of your employees are Detroit. But I'd also like the city to publish what minority, how many women-owned contractors are there, how many Black-owned contractors, and you'll always get pushback because they're not allowed to give preference, but we're not asking for preference, we're asking for the data,
Mhm.
right? And you can publish data without giving a preference, and so that's the first thing I'll say. The second thing I'll say when it comes to capacity is that the only way to deal with the capacity issue, if you want to solve it, is to deal with the capacity issue. And you deal with the capacity issue by dealing with all of the other barriers that are impacting small business. So if we don't have a comprehensive small business strategy, I think my motion detector, sorry, light went off. Sorry about that.
That's okay. We can edit around that.
Okay. If you don't have a comprehensive small business strategy around starting small business, right? If you're not thinking 4 or 5 years ahead of time to be able to say, you know what? These contracts are coming to an end, and we know they're coming to an end in 3 years. What can we be doing in the small business ecosystem to make sure we got Detroit businesses ready for these contracts when they come available? That's that level of proactive participation you need, but you've got to care. You got to actually be measuring and putting your own report card out there in order to do the work so that your report card looks the way you want it to look. But if you're not publishing it and you're not sharing it, then you'll always just say, well, they don't have the capacity. I mean, and that's been the excuse. I mean, you could say that has been an excuse really used for people of color, for Black people for a long time, depending on what it is. Or there's not enough lawyers. Well, they can't pass a test, or they're not enough, they can't do this, which is it's just not true, right? And so the question is, what are you doing to accomplish that goal? And are you going 4 or 5 years ahead of time? When we think about manufacturing plants, or when we think about really trying to recruit and attract talent, we think ahead of time, right? We're thinking years in advance. When you invest in large tech companies, you're thinking 10 years, 7 years ahead of time, right? We're just getting into AI, but there's been investment in AI, you know, for over a decade. And so with that same intentionality, you can change the game on Detroiters getting contracts. And with that same intentionality, you can change the game on Black businesses growing, scaling, and thriving.
I want to ask about how public transit fits into some of this. It seems like a big issue for workers to be able to get to jobs, that they need. And so when a bus is late, or if you can't rely on public transit, that kind of stands in the way of being able to get economic opportunities. It's also, the D2A2 bus to Ann Arbor. People use that to go to frequent restaurants. And I wonder if there's more people going from Detroit to Ann Arbor than Ann Arbor to Detroit for that kind of thing, for like a day trip.
Mhm.
Do you see, public transit as being important for this overall kind of conversation about supporting small business?
Absolutely, because after access to capital, the second number, the second issue for small business is labor, workforce. And so these are whether you're talking about childcare, whether you're talking about transportation, whether you're talking about creative ways to provide healthcare and other benefits. These are issues that impact our members as well, 100%. If the buses aren't running on time and someone gets to work late and that they can't open the coffee shop because this has happened, right? And so we do need a comprehensive transit plan. I'd love to have amazing regional transit. But you also got to deal with, like, we cover some race issues. There's some real race issues in Michigan, and we just got to call it out
Mhm.
because it is. And until we can name it and then solve it, we're just always going to do this dance of like, well, we don't want to go to Detroit.
Yeah.
It's a thing. But absolutely, it is critical to the success of small business being able to have reliable and safe transportation for the workforce.
Here's maybe kind of a roundabout example, but this week, Twitter's main villain for Detroit is a person that was complaining about a parking ticket that he
I
got. Right? He went to go to a business to get a cup of soup. He didn't pay the parking meter because he felt like he was just going to be in and out, and then he got hit with a ticket. And he said, "You know what? I'm not coming back into Detroit to do business here because this is a barrier." And a lot of people were saying, "Hey, man, it costs like $1 to get your parking." So that's kind of, I don't know. He's been getting dragged a little bit, including by the city's official Twitter account.
I saw that, and it's funny because at first I saw his post. I don't know how it came up, and then I saw the city's retweet. So I think a couple of things. One, that's not like no one's attacking you. We have to pay. Like, we have to pay to park, and you have to pay to park in any city. When you go to Ann Arbor, when you're in Royal Oak, no one's saying that, right? If you get a ticket in Ferndale, you're not saying, "Oh, I'm never coming back to Ferndale again because I didn't pay the parking." It's easy to rag on Detroit. That's the easy thing. That's low hanging fruit. That's easy to do. Because a lot of times, I think it goes back to what I was saying earlier about charity. If you look at whatever you're doing in the city as if doing it from a place of charity, then you're going to feel like people should be grateful that you're here. And how dare they enforce parking,
Yeah.
enforce their ordinance on you because we should be grateful that you decided to get sued. And that just comes from a place of entitlement. But that happens. It's easy to do that in Detroit. I don't feel like it is a barrier to business that we charge for parking. I think in 2025, I think that's a 20th century issue. We could have been arguing about that in the 40s, but this is not even a new thing. Like, you do have to pay for parking.
There's been, I think, some conversation around getting rid of mandatory parking minimums for new businesses as well. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Look, I'll say this to my friends at the City of Detroit Parking Department who's probably watching this and saying, "Yeah, I owe some tickets, so I just want to give that disclaimer."
Me too. Me too. Yeah.
I have a very interesting relationship with the parking department. No, when COVID first happened, the first thing we did actually was put those 15-minute signs out. And I think that was the point, was to make sure that people knew that they could come in and go in and out of food. I think the city's got to do, when it comes to parking, there's so many other things that are at play. It's not just the business, it's traffic, it's where it is, it's the residents that live in that area. I don't have too much of an opinion around how the city decides to do its parking as it relates to business, except that as long as businesses uh convened like stakeholders, just like residents are, I think that's fine. But the city of Detroit's got to figure that out. Like, I'm not a parking expert or planning expert to say that. And it does. I mean, there are things that just come with being in a big city, and that's not new, you know.
Yeah, it's kind of funny how people have all these parking opinions. But Charity, I could definitely keep you here all afternoon, but I feel like we've covered a lot in this conversation. I really appreciate your time and insight on these issues. So thank you so much for joining us. I'd love to have you back on another time.
Thank you very much. I'm happy to be here.
All right, thanks for joining us for another episode of Detroit Next. We are going to keep diving into various issues affecting the city here as we get closer to Election Day. If you like what we're doing, please support us so that we can keep this free. Go to DetroitisDifferent.com. We're also in our fall fundraising drive for Bridge Detroit right now. We'd really appreciate it if people could chuck in a couple of dollars. Whatever you can spare is really helpful. But you can find this podcast on your normal podcast networks, Spotify, Apple, iHeartRadio, and the like. You can also find us on YouTube if you want a video version. See us in full Technicolor 4K.
There we go. Love that.
But we want to hear your feedback, so listen to these episodes and hit us up and let us know more of kind of what you want to hear in our last few episodes.
Yeah, definitely. We're looking forward to offering a lot more perspective and a couple more things definitely that are on the hearts and minds of Detroiters will be coming these last episodes of Detroit Next for this election season.
Detroit Next is a community-led project from Bridge Detroit and Detroit is Different, which means that we can't do this work without you. We need your support. If you have a question or a comment and want to participate in this process throughout the year, give us a call. We have a phone line set up at 313-284-6407. Leave us a message and we'll play it on the podcast. If you like what we're doing, head to bridgedetroit.com and subscribe to our newsletters. All of that content, again, is free, no paywalls for anybody. We're trying to make this as accessible as possible. Head to our YouTube channel to get full episodes and interviews along with extra content throughout the year. You can also find the audio version of this podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, and DetroitNext.podbean.com. We're going to be doing this all year long, so stay with us. Follow Bridge Detroit and Detroit is Different on your favorite social media platforms and take this ride with us. Thanks.